I have been seeing so many people with the wrong class setups, and so in today's video we are going to be going over all of the best weapons with the best setups. First off, the best SMG is going to be the Vaznev, and so I got you guys a S&D version, then a respawn version, and then the best AR is going to be the TAC 56. The ISO is also a very good weapon. I believe it's a little bit better than the TAC at close to medium range. It's just the TAC has a little bit more damage range. That being said, I got you guys a few ISO setups that you guys should definitely check out, and then I got a sniper class setup and then a bonus Kastov and MP5. For the Vaznev respawn setup, I really recommend you guys to run a knife. It allows you to run around the map a little bit quicker. For the tactical and lethal, I really recommend you guys to run the stun and the Semtex. The grenade is good, but I found the grenade is a lot better on search and destroy, and Semtex is a lot better on control and hardpoint. On the perks, you guys want to run the double time bomb squad and fast hand. Some people do like to run battle hardened, but I found bomb squad is just a little bit more consistent. And lastly, for the field upgrade, this really depends on what your teammates are running. Typically on respawn, I'll usually run the trophy, and then on search and destroy, I will run the dead silence. But there is times on respawn where the dead silence will come in clutch, like on fortress control. You can run around the fortress with your dead silence on defending that while your teammates capture. So it really depends on what your team is running in the mode, but overall, you usually just want to run something similar to this. For the setup, so this is going to be a more high mobility Vaznev setup. I got you guys also a ranged version. So if you guys take a look at this stock, this is a brand new stock in the game. It's called the Broadside FCT. This is a great stock, adds a lot of mobility without that many cons. Previously, we would run this stock, which is still a great option. You don't get as much mobility, but you're not losing as many stats, and so if you want that, feel free to run that, but more people are running the Broadside. On the tuning for this guy, you want to increase ADS speed and the aim walking speed. With these tunings, I'm not trying to get the most amount of ADS speed, I'm trying to get the most amount of ADS speed without having that many cons, if that makes sense. Next up, for the rear grip, you guys want to run the True Tag grip. This adds a lot of mobility to the weapon. We are losing recoil control, but you're not going to really notice it, especially because of these two attachments. On the tuning, you guys want to increase the ADS speed and the sprint to fire speed. This is very crucial. You guys are going to be playing very aggressive, so you need a high sprint to fire. Next up, you guys want to go over to the shark fin. Some people like to run the edge 47. If you want to run that, I'll give you the tuning for that in a second, but in my opinion, I believe the shark fin is a lot better. You don't get any cons with the edge, you do get cons. And then for the tuning on the shark fin, make sure you increase the recoil stabilization, which is going to reduce the horizontal recoil on the weapon, and then increase the aiming auto stability, eliminating all the sway on the weapon. And lastly, for the muzzle, you guys want to use the Bruin Pendulum. All the professional players run this one. This is for sure the best muzzle for recoil control on the Vaznev. On the tuning, we are going to go ahead and increase that recoil stabilization, which is that horizontal recoil control, and then increase the gun kick control, which is your vertical recoil control. This is 100% the best aggressive build in the game. You're not going to have the most damage range, but as long as you're in the enemy's face, you should be popping off. Next up, I want to give you guys a very similar setup, but we're actually going to be running a barrel on the weapon, which this gun did just get a nerf, and that nerf was reducing the damage range, although it wasn't a big nerf at all. Like, it literally didn't change any of the stats on the weapon. That being said, we're not running this barrel because of that nerf. This is just a very good setup that people used before that nerf. The only thing is that you're losing a lot of your mobility, although you do get a lot of damage range, allowing you to use the weapon up to medium range. I really like to use this on search and destroy. For the tuning on this guy, we're just going to increase the recoil steadiness, and then because we are losing a lot of ADS speed and the damage range is already pretty good, I found just increasing the ADS speed is the best option. When we take a look at the weapon, you guys can see overall mobility is still the same, but the ADS speed is a tad slower. There is still a lot of players, including myself, like to use this in respawn. It's just typically this is going to be a little bit more popular in search and destroy because you don't need to be as aggressive. You're just kind of holding angles. There is one more setup that I see some players running. I don't really care for it, but they're going to be running this stock. I'll give you the tuning in a second, and then you actually take off the muzzle. So now you're going to have more damage range, but there is going to be more recoil on the weapon, which is why we're running this stock rather than the broadside. For the tuning, I recommend you guys to increase the ADS speed. The aim walking steadiness honestly doesn't really matter. Then just increase the aim walking speed, giving you a little bit more strafe, so you'll be a harder target to hit. Lastly, if you guys do want to use the Edge 47 grip, you can use it on any of those Vaznev builds I gave you, although for me, I don't really like it, but there is some people that do. So for the tuning on this, bring up the aiming idle stability. It's going to make the weapon have way less sway, and then for this left bar, I found just keeping it in the middle was the best thing, mainly because with this grip, we are losing ADS speed, and so you don't really want to lose more by increasing the horizontal recoil control, and then you don't want to lose more recoil control by increasing ADS speed. Bring up the aiming idle stability, making the weapon weapon a lot more stable, and then on this left bar, I recommend just keeping it at 0, makes the weapon feel so much better. With all that said though, let's get on to the next setup. So this is going to be the TAC 56, and there's actually about 3 to 4 different setups. There really isn't one certain meta setup that everyone runs. I found when I was going through all the pro player setups, everyone's kind of running something a little bit different. So these setups I'm going to be giving you is just like the most popular ones, although, you know, finding your personal preference is going to be the best thing. For the first one, this is going to be an aggressive TAC 56 build. You can actually use this weapon like an SMG, especially with this build, and it completely shreds. For the barrel, you pretty much want to run this on every single TAC 56 build if you're playing ranked. It just really increases that damage range without having that many cons. Then for the tuning, you guys want to increase recoil steadiness and the damage range. For this underbarrel, some people like to use the phase 3 grip, so if you want more recoil control, run that. I'll give you the tuning for that in a second. For me though, if I'm going to be aggressive with this thing, I want a lot of ADS speed, so we're running the shark fin 90, and then you want to tune it for more horizontal recoil control and then more aiming idle stability, eliminating all the sway on the weapon. Next up, you want to run the high velocity rounds just to make it so our bullets leave our gun and hit the enemies a lot quicker, makes the weapon feel more like hit scan. For the tuning, again, increase that damage range in the bullet velocity. I believe it gives it about 5% more damage range, which is honestly pretty nice. For the rear grip, we are going to be running the clean shot grip just to maximize the mobility. On the other builds I'll give you in a second, we are going to be using the combat grip, but for this one, clean shot. On the tuning, increase the overall mobility. Across the board, every gun in this game has a slow sprint of fire, so whenever you see the stat, you need to increase that value. And lastly, for the stock, you want to run the cardinal stock. This can give you a lot of stray speed, and you can run around the map a little bit quicker because you get that sprint speed. Some people do like to run the X-Line Pro on their aggressive build. They'll run this with the shark fin 90, or they'll run the cardinal with the phase 3 grip. Really is personal preference. I'm just giving you like my personal preference and like the most common thing I see in the COD scene. And then for the tuning, bring up the ADS speed and the aim walking speed. And so now if we go into the firing range, you guys can see there is a lot of mobility on the weapon, a pretty snappy ADS, and we still got a lot of damage range and a lot of recoil control. It's just that long range. If you're playing against someone with a slower attack build, you might get gunned, and so if you do need to use a longer range setup, I recommend you guys to use this exact one. We are going to be using the X-Line Pro. On the rear grip, we're using the combat grip now. This is going to give us a lot more recoil control. And then for the tuning, you guys want to increase the ADS to it by just a tad. You're still going to have a lot of recoil control, but the gun will feel a little bit better, and then obviously increase the sprint of fire. On the tuning for the X-Line Pro, you guys want to increase ADS speed and the aim walking speed. For the Tundra Pro barrel, it should be the same exact tuning. And for the phase 3 grip, this is going to add a lot of recoil control to the weapon, although you're not going to have the most amount of mobility. For the tuning though, you want to increase the recoil stabilization and the aiming idle stability. If you want to use the phase 3 on the previous TAC build I just gave you, do the same exact tuning. For the ammo then, you just want to run the high velocity rounds with the same amount of tuning. Now you guys can see a little bit slower ADS, but there is going to be more recoil control on the weapon, and this is like probably my favorite setup for search and destroy, since this stock does give you a lot of crouch movement speed, and on search you do need to crouch walk a lot because footsteps, you sound like an elephant in this game. And for the last TAC 56 setup, this is also a pretty good one, although I don't really like it. This is just good if you're trying to like shoot people across the map. Very easy to hold angles. Like if your teammates are playing aggressive and you're making sure the enemies can't flank and you just want to prop up, you are going to love this setup. Throw on the FJX Fulcrum Pro. I saw a lot of people running this. Previously I'd run like one of these, but so many people are running this one, so it's probably the best. Which to add this, I recommend just taking off that rear grip, and so just run this exact build. If you want to run the exact build with a little bit more mobility, feel free to take off this phase 3 and add the shark fin. And then if you're not playing search and destroy, you might want to take this off and add the cardinal stock. And for the tuning on the FJX Fulcrum Pro, you guys want to increase recoil stabilization and the gun kick control. Pretty sure I forgot to show you guys the search and destroy perks, like what I run. Pretty much it's the same exact thing as my respawn, but I swap out the lethal for a frag. Typically the field upgrade is going to be the dead silence, and then over here usually I'll just run double time bomb squad fastens unless my teammate does have a trophy system, which then at the beginning of the match they can throw down the trophy system, blocking that spawn nade, making it so I don't really need bomb squad and I can run the battle hardened, so I can play a little bit more aggro. Which that is for search and destroy. And then I believe I already explained the respawn perks, and I literally run the same exact perks for every search and destroy class and every single respawn class. Next up boys, we got the ISO. This is going to be a very fun setup to use. This is going to be like a medium range ranged one that's good for like search or respawn, doesn't really matter. For the attachments, there is a lot of different variations. There isn't just one set good class, but you guys should really like this. I see a lot of good players liking it, and I really like it. So to start things off, we are going to be running an optic just because. Here, let's take a look at these iron sights. These iron sights are absolutely horrendous. So much is going on. Like, you can easily pop off with them, and I do have a setup with the iron sights if you'd like that, but it's just like there's so much going on. That being said, I believe the Chrono Mini Pro is going to be the best optic. It is a clean blue dot sight, and I really like how they show the reticle on the screen now. That is so sick. That would actually be even cooler if we could swap out like the color or the design like in every other Call of Duty. And then for the tuning on this optic, bring up the flinch resistance, making it a little bit easier to stay on target when the enemy is shooting at you. For that bottom bar, this is going to be personal preference. The farther you make it, the smaller the enemies are going to be, but the less visual recoil and more FOV you're going to have. So you kind of got to pick your poison. For me, I kind of like it right in the middle, but again, that is all personal preference. For the stock, you guys want to run the RCOM or the Res 2 or the Raid 90. They're all pretty good. With the RCOM, you get the most amount of mobility, but you are losing a lot of recoil control, although there isn't really any recoil on the weapon, so that's why I like this one. For the tuning though on the RCOM stock, you guys want to increase the overall mobility of the weapon. For the rear grip, we're going to be adding the X10 grip. This is going to add a lot more mobility to the weapon, although we are losing recoil control, but you shouldn't really feel it when you are using the weapon. Then for the tuning on this guy, you want to increase the overall mobility of the weapon. Next up, we are going to be adding the Shark Fin 90. This is going to add a lot of aiming stability, recoil stabilization without that many cons. Feel free to swap this out for the phase 3 grip if you want a little bit more recoil control and tune it like how I tuned the phase 3 grip before. For the tuning on the Shark Fin though, you want to increase recoil stabilization, reducing the horizontal recoil to increase the aiming idle stability, eliminating the sway on the weapon. And lastly, for the muzzle, you want to add the Fulcrum Pro. I know Exclusive Ace, he likes to use the Sock and Tread 40. I do like this one. I just feel this one gives a little bit more recoil control, but overall this is all personal preference. Use whatever you want. Then for the tuning, you guys want to increase horizontal recoil control and the vertical recoil control by increasing that gun kick control. And then if we go into the firing range, I just want to show you guys, still have a lot of mobility on the weapon, allowing you to rush very easily with it. And then as you guys can see, absolutely zero recoil. This is a very easy, fun build to use. Next up, I want to give you guys pretty much the same build, but it's going to be more of a long range setup. I really like to use this on search and destroy, or if I'm trying to sit back as like a slow AR watching all the flanks. So if we go over here to the S&D class, this is my favorite long range setup. We are going to be running the LR barrel, which is going to increase the overall firepower of the weapon. We are losing some mobility, but like I said before, you aren't going to be really rushing with this build. For the stock, just to make sure we still have a lot of recoil control, we are going to be running the Res 2, Raid 90, and the RCOM. They're all pretty good. Just on this build, I found this one is the best one. On the tuning, you guys want to increase the overall ADS speed and the aim walking speed, allowing you to strafe a little bit quicker. For the tuning on this barrel, you guys want to increase recoil steadiness and that damage range, furthermore increasing the damage output of the gun. On the underbarrel, the gun might be a little bit too slow, so if you want, you can add the Shark Fin 90 or you can add the Edge 47. This one is pretty good. It's kind of like right in the middle between the Shark Fin and the phase 3 grip. The tuning on the Edge 47 will be the same tuning that I gave previously on that Vaznev setup. And then for the tuning on the phase 3 grip, you guys want to increase recoil stabilization and aiming idle stability, making the weapon very stable and easy to use. And then the tuning on the X10 is going to be the same thing, and I just want to show you guys real quick. Very noticeable on the ADS, a little bit slower, but overall, you know, you are sitting back, so it shouldn't really hinder you that much. And then the overall damage output and recoil control, very easy to use the weapon. Lastly, if you want a little bit more recoil control, this is a great way to make this gun an absolute beam. You want to go over here and throw on the FJX, tune it the same way as before, and then if we go over here, you guys can see very slow ADS, but if you're sitting back watching flanks, that shouldn't really matter. But the overall recoil, absolutely no recoil. So easy to use the gun, although I like to move around a little bit more, and so I personally don't really like this setup. For the last ISO setup, this is going to be more of a very aggressive one. This is very fun to use on like a hard point or control. Also very fun in those public matches. We are going to be running the RCQ barrel, which is going to add a lot of mobility, although really does bring down our overall damage and everything, and so that is the one con. But if you use it like an SMG, you should pop up, pop off, and then to mitigate the cons that we're getting with the barrel, barrel, you want to use the high velocity rounds and then tune it like this to get that damage range back. On the underbarrel, we're running the phase 3 grip just because we are losing a lot of recoil control. You want to tune it just like this. And for the stock, I found the raid 90 was the best. We don't really need that crouch movement speed if you are playing hardpoint or control, but overall this makes the weapon feel very good and there's not really any noticeable cons. On the tuning, you guys want to increase ADS speed and the aim walking speed, and then I believe the rear grip is going to be the same thing. If you do want to run an optic, feel free to take off the high velocity or the X10 and then add that blue dot sight and tune it the same way as before. When we take a look at this, you guys can see very snappy ADS, and there's absolutely like no recoil on the weapon. Okay, I did miss some shots. Long range, you don't really want to use this, but overall up to medium range should be very easy to beat those targets, especially if you are strafing in your gunfight. With all that said, I think that is going to wrap it up for the ISO setup, and now those are all the main ones. So if you want to use a sniper, the professionals actually don't run any attachments. So if you want to play just like the pros, they're not going to be running any attachments. And actually, the pros don't even tune their weapons. Say you are using a sniper, I really recommend you guys to run the X12, just because if you're running a knife and the enemy rushes you, you can't really quit scope them, or if you miss that one shot, you're kind of dead. That being said, I really recommend you guys to run the X12. It's the only pistol available in the ranked play, and then we're just going to be keeping it simple, just throwing the lightning fire and the Cronin Lima 6. This is going to allow you to pull out the weapon a little bit quicker, and then for the tuning, just max out the mobility, and then this one is just going to allow you to fire a little bit quicker without that many cons. Like it says, we're losing sprint to fire speed, but it's really not that much. And for the tuning, you guys want to increase the overall mobility again, and so this is a very good sniper class. Really don't recommend sniping in like control or hardpoint, but search it is helpful. And lastly, for the last two setups, I'm not going to go too in depth with these are just some fun class setups, not the meta, but they're close to meta and you can still pop off and do very well with them. So the first one is going to be the Kastov 762. This is a very fun class, very fun in respawn, in public matches as well. On the muzzle, for a lot of recoil control, we're adding the KT85, just increase overall recoil control. And for the underbarrel, we're running the Shark Fin 90. You could add the phase 3, but there's really not that much recoil. It's just if you want more recoil control, feel free to run the phase 3. And for the tuning on this guy, you want to increase horizontal recoil control and aiming idle stability. For the stock, to add a lot of mobility but not add that many cons, we are going to be running the Kastov Rama. The broadside was recently just added, but I don't really know if I like it that much on this build. I do way better when I run this stock, although in the future you might see a setup from me with the broadside. It's just I don't really know if I like it. It just makes the weapon feel a little bit too bouncy, and the gun already has enough mobility with this setup, and so I just recommend sticking with this for now, and then just increase overall mobility. For the tuning on the optic, you don't really need an optic. If you don't want to run an optic, run the high velocity rounds, tune that for damage range and bow velocity. But I find myself being way more consistent, which that is huge. You got to be a consistent player. I feel myself being more consistent with the Cronin Mini Pro, and then tune it just like this. And then lastly, for the rear grip, to add a little bit more mobility without that many cons, add the True Tag grip. Not the best ADS speed, but it is going to be pretty good. I only really use this build if I'm going to be playing Search and Destroy, or if I'm like a support player on control or hardpoint, which I think that is going to wrap it up for this build. And for the last build I want to give you, this is going to be the MP5. I got two different setups for you, one very aggressive and then one like aggressive one. So the first one, this is going to be like the aggressive build. It says best up here, but don't listen to that. This one is just as good as the other one. This one is going to be pretty easy to use. We are going to be running the mobile stock just for a lot of mobility. We are having a lot of cons, but I'll show you guys when we test out the weapon. There's really not that much recoil. On the tuning, bring up the overall mobility. On the rear grip, we are going to be running the Cronus just for flinch resistance, making it a little bit easy to stay on target. Say you find yourself not really needing that, you guys can also add a 40 round mag. 50 round is good, but the mobility is way too slow, so if you do add a mag, I really recommend the 40. You could also run a barrel, but I find the barrels just really hurt the weapon. Like, you get a lot of pros, but then you get a lot of cons, and so I just stay away from those. Same goes for the optic. You don't really need an optic. The iron sights are pretty good, but I find myself being a little bit more consistent when I do run an optic. Here is the tuning for that. And then for the underbarrel, we're running the Shark Fin 90. You want to tune it for recoil stabilization, aim walking speed, and lastly, for that recoil control, we are going to be running the lock shot grip. You can run a different one if you want, but I find the lock shot feels pretty good on this weapon, and then tune it just like this. Now, if we go into the firing range, you guys can see we got a pretty snappy ADS, overall recoil control, very easy to control the weapon despite having that stock bringing down the recoil control. It's just very Easy to use this weapon. It's very, very fun. Vaznev, in my opinion, is a little bit better, but this is like almost just as good. It's kind of like the M4 compared to the AK-74U. And for the last setup of this entire long ass video, you guys want to run this one. I actually use this in public matches, so I need to fix this real quick. Pretty much run it just like this. If you want to run an optic, feel free to run an optic, but for some reason with this build, I play more consistent when I don't have an optic. We are going to be running the stockless mod, which is going to severely increase the mobility, allowing you to really rush and be in the enemy's face with it. Although it is going to completely kill the recoil control, and so that's why you got to be very aggressive. You got to be in their face to use it, because if they're on a heady at medium range, you're not going to be able to kill them. On the rear up, to get a little bit more recoil control, where you're going to be running the Lachmann TCG, and honestly, you could run this on the other build if you want more recoil control, although I don't really think you need it. For the tuning, bring up the ADS speed and the sprint to fire speed. On the underbarrel, we are going to be running the operator foregrip, which just makes the weapon feel very good. It just adds a lot of hip fire accuracy, allows you to play aggressive. On the tuning for this, we are going to be increasing the ADS speed, hip walking speed, and then lastly, for a little bit more recoil control, we are running the lock shot with this tuning. With all that said, that is going to wrap it up. I hope you guys did find this helpful. If you want more videos like this, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and a like is appreciated. But I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day. That was a long ass video, dude.
I bought a yard today, let her paint it all yellow like a bird.